Hello, everybody. Welcome to Miss Maguire online video lecture, and today we're covering Introduction to the Nervous System. So I'm going to start with the functional division of the nervous system that will include sensory input. So in this example, your sensory input will be visual information. So you see this glass of water, right? Your eyes, so the retina of the eyes, and then neurons that make optic nerve, they send this sensory information to your brain. So that's the first function, sensory input. Then your brain will integrate this information. So that's function number 2, integration. And then your brain will decide what to do about this information that it received, and it's going to send motor output to your muscles. So your muscles will contract so you can pick up the glass of water and drink. So the third function is motor output. So sensory input, integration, and motor output. Those are a functional division of the nervous system. So here you can read about what we just said. Sensory input. We have millions of sensory receptors, and they monitor changes inside and outside and gather the information. Now, these changes that happens inside or outside your body called stimulus. So stimulus is any change inside or outside of your body. So sensory input, those sensory receptors will monitor those stimuli and gather information. Integration. Process information received from sensory input. Now, integration will be your central nervous system that will process this information and makes decision. And motor output. Your nervous system will dictate response from brain to muscles and or glands. So when motor output sent to skeletal muscles, then it will be your voluntary response. When it will be sent to smooth or cardiac muscles, that will be involuntary response. Or it can be sent, motor output can be sent to the glands, and they will release their product or secretion, and it's going to be also involuntary response. So anatomical division of the nervous system includes central nervous system, or CNS, that is brain and spinal cord. They are integrating and control centers. So brain and spinal cord, they are integrating and control center. They receive sensory information, interpret sensory information or data, and dictate motor response. So, so here's your brain in the cranial cavity and spinal cord inside vertebral cavity. And the second part of nervous system is PNS, or peripheral nervous system. This one work as communication lines and include a nerve that extends from brain, right? So, and we call it cranial nerves, and nerve that extends from the spine, from spinal cord, and we call them spinal nerves, right? So peripheral nervous system includes pretty much everything rather than your brain and spinal cord. So brain and spinal cord is CNS, but major organs, nerves, cranial or spinal, and associated nervous structure like ganglia or receptors or motor endings, those are part of PNS. Now, because nerves are the major organs of PNS, right? We have cranial nerves and spinal nerves, and it depends where those nerves extend from. If they branching from brain, they are cranial nerve. If they branching from spinal cord, they are spinal nerves. Oh, sorry. So organization of PNS, peripheral nervous system. It has sensory division. Another name is afferent division. and sensory information goes towards central nervous system. And motor division or efferent always away from central nervous system. And this motor division includes somatic nervous system and autonomic nervous system. Now, somatic is under voluntary control, and somatic division innervates skeletal muscle. Autonomic nervous system is involuntary control and innervates cardiac and smooth muscles and glands. And autonomic nervous system divided into sympathetic division that mobilize body system during activity, and parasympathetic division house keeping during rest, energy conservation. So sympathetic division called fight or flight response, and parasympathetic is rest and digest. Okay, so I'm trying to pick up my. So what we just said, you can see on this diagram. So here's nervous system divided into central, that includes brain and spinal cord. And you can see peripheral nervous system has way more divisions that we need to cover that we just did. So peripheral nervous system includes sensory division, and sensory information goes toward the central. And motor division. And motor division is from center to the effector organs. And now motor division is divided into autonomic nervous system or somatic nervous system. Autonomic nervous system includes sympathetic division and parasympathetic division. So what is this difference between sympathetic and parasympathetic division? So we already said sympathetic is called fight or flight response. So it's activated when body senses an emergency, right? Fight or flight response. So it causes increase the heart rate. So of course, if you have an emergency, and it doesn't necessarily something that threatens your life, it can be just you go to a gym and you exercises, right? Something that that's activity of your body. And you know, when you exercise, what happens? Your heart rate increases. It relaxes airways, so more air can move inside your lungs. Your pupils dilate, that create better vision. And digestive system slow down, so you have limited digestion, so there is no time to digest when you exercise, and more blood flow to skeletal muscles for fast action. Now, parasympathetic division is rest and digest. So body is relaxed, maintaining activity and digesting food. So then heart rate, what? It decreases. Constrict airways because you don't need that much air, so you less air move to your lungs. Pupil constrict, limit light into your eyes, and digestive system speeds up. Food digestion happens, right? So now you can see they kind of opposite. If sympathetic is increases heart rate, then parasympathetic decreases. If digestive system slows when it's sympathetic response, in the parasympathetic, it speed ups. And you can see pupil dilate in sympathetic or constrict in parasympathetic. So a nervous system is made of organs, like any system, like cardiovascular system is made of organs, your heart, your blood vessels. Nervous system is made of organs, like brain, spinal cord, nerves. Organs made of tissues, and tissues made of cells. So let's look what cells make your nervous system. We call them neurons. So neurons has, so let me see if you picture over here. Yeah, so look at the picture first. So this is example of a neuron. This is motor neuron, and it has what we call a cell body or soma. And this is where you have a nucleus and most of the organelles. Of course, this line is a cell membrane. Now, shorter and branching processes called dendrites. So dendrites send information towards the cell body. Then we have axon. So this is a longer process, and usually it does not branch. It's only has branches at axon terminal. So axons send information away from a cell body. So we have soma, we have dendrites, we have axon, and we have axon terminal. And axons might be myelinated. This is not motor neuron, I'm sorry. Because if you have oligodendrocyte, that's neuron of a central nervous system. So it only can be interneurons. This covering along axon is called myelin sheath. And it's not continuous covering, it has gaps. And this gap is called a node of Ranvier, right? So that's a structure of neuron. So if you go back, you can read over here, dendrites, branches from cell body, consider receptive sites, send electrical signals towards the cell body. Cell body or soma, single nucleus surrounded by cytoplasm, organelles, produces proteins called neurotransmitters required for communication. Axon, transmit electrical signals away from cell body. Really long axons called nerve fiber. And axon terminals are present at the end of axon and store neurotransmitters. We have only one axon per neuron. So every neuron, human neuron, have only one axon, and they will have multiple dendrites. And we already look at the picture. So here's how information is flowing. So here's our cell body. Those are dendrites. So dendrites are receptive structure. So they receive impulses from other neurons, and they collect electrical signals and send them towards cell body. Cell body integrates incoming signals and generate outgoing signals to axon. So here, send outgoing signal away from cell body along axon. So axon passes electrical signal to dendrites of another cell or to the effector cell. So here's our axon terminal, and from here, electrical signal will be sent to another neuron, dendrites of that neuron, or effector cells, for example, muscle cell. So how neurons communicate? So neurons communicate with each other in regions called synapse. So synapse is a structure, right, where neuron communicate with another neuron or with another cell. So it can be muscle cells or gland. But in this example, we're looking at two neuron communication. Then we have presynaptic neuron, and we have postsynaptic neuron. That makes sense. So when impulse goes towards the synapse, the neuron that sends signals toward synapse is presynaptic, and then signal will go away from synapse, and this will be a job of postsynaptic neuron. So presynaptic neurons send signal towards the synapse, postsynaptic neurons transmit signals away from synapse, and this gap between two neurons is called synaptic cleft. And this red structure here, those are chemical called neurotransmitters that are released into synapse. So here's some link to a YouTube video that you guys should watch. All right, now when this electrical signal moves along a neuron, this signal has name. It's called action potential, right? So when action potential moves along a neuron, we call it action potential, and on a graph, this is how it will look like, right? So this graph just show you action potential. When action potential reaches synapse, neurotransmitters are released inside the synaptic cleft. On postsynaptic neuron, we have receptors for neurotransmitters. So neurotransmitters then attach to the receptors, and this will create electrical impulse now inside postsynaptic neuron. But neurons are not the only cells that part of the nervous system. We have supporting cells or neuroglia. In central nervous system and in peripheral nervous system, we have different supporting cells. So we have neurons in central and peripheral systems, but supporting cells in central and peripheral are different. So these astrocytes, that here's a picture. This is the cell of central nervous system, most abundant. A function is regulation of a neurotransmitter level and regulation of ion intake by neurons. So what astrocytes do, they support the neurons. They regulate the amount of neurotransmitters that a neuron secrete. It regulates what ion can enter neuron. Another very important function of astrocytes, it's actually create blood-brain barrier. So this is blood capillaries of the blood. So the blood, that's a blood vessel. So the blood is inside. And astrocytes, you see this feet of astrocytes, so they form the they cover the blood vessels, and by covering these blood vessels, they reduce their permeability. So not everything can leave the blood and enter your brain tissue or spinal cord tissue. Another supporting cell is microglial cells. They also part of CNS. So this is CNS, this is CNS. They're less abundant and smaller, and they're important in immune function. So this is how they look. Of course, it's a cartoon pictures, but those are cells that have this horny processes, and then they can change the shape and became phages. So they will engulf pathogens or different debris and give your immunity to your brain and spinal cord. Okay. So next we have oligodendrocytes. So oligodendrocytes also part of CNS, and they create this myelin sheath. Myelin sheath is a fatty insulation covering the cells. So you see on the axon, this covering over here, that's myelin sheath. In the peripheral nervous system, we also have myelin sheath, but different cells make it, and they call Schwann cells. So oligodendrocytes and Schwann cells, they both create this myelin sheath, but oligodendrocytes created in CNS, Schwann cells in PNS. And myelin, this is this fatty insulation covering axons, so like shown over here. So what is this myelin sheath? A little bit more, right? So cells, oligodendrocytes and Schwann cells wrapped around the axons. So the Schwann cell, actually the Schwann cells wraps, oligodendrocytes doesn't, but Schwann cells wrap itself around the axon and form this covering. It helps with insulation and help with creating a strong nerve impulse. So neurons can be classified based on structure, what they look like, and function, what they do. If we classify them based on structure, we're going to look how many extensions originate from cell body. And so you have a cell body, and then you have these processes, right? So it depends how many comes from cell body. And function, direction of nerve impulse, a direction in which nerve impulse travel, what they do. So let's look at next slide so everything will make sense. So here's our functional classification. Remember what they do. So sensory neurons, so what they do, they send messages to the central nervous system. Motor neurons, what they do, they carry messages from central nervous system to muscles and glands. And interneuron, they connect motor and sensory neurons, and they are most common, those interneurons. So that's functional classification. So over here, we're gonna look at this functional classification and how the impulse and integration of these impulses. So here, as I show you a skin, so inside the skin, you have a receptor, pain receptor, because you have like this needle, right? So you have different receptors in your skin. You have a pressure receptor, you have a vibration, you have temperature receptor. This example just show you how your pain receptor works. So pain receptor is actually the dendrite. So here's the dendrite of the neuron. So this information about pain travels through the, so we have a receptor. So first we must have a receptor. Then we have this sensory neuron. So sensory neuron allow this information about pain travel to your spinal cord. In the spinal cord, we have integration center. So it's going to be interneuron. So sensory neuron synapses with interneuron. Interneuron, we just read, it connects sensory and motor neurons. Then we have a motor neuron that sends information away from central nervous system to the effector that in this situation is muscle. And this is our structural classification. We already said that depends how many processes we have from a cell body. So here's the cell body, this blue bubble, right? So if we have multiple processes, like here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, then we call it multipolar neuron. Multipolar neuron has more than 2 processes, usually numerous dendrites and single axon, and this is 99% of neurons, multipolar neurons. Then we have unipolar neuron, when we have only 1 process from cell body, and it's a single process emerging from cell body. So it's 1, so it's a unipolar. And then we have bipolar neuron, when we have 2 processes coming from cell body in the opposite direction, right? And we call it this peripheral process, and we call this central process, but so we don't call it dendrite anymore, right? Right, we call this also peripheral and central processes, but this is really our dendrites. And this is axon, because remember what axon is. It's carry impulse away from cell body. So if you go away from cell body, then by definition, this is our axon. And everything else that if carry information towards cell body, that's dendrites. So unipolar neurons are the second most common neuron. So multipolar, mostly multipolar, then unipolar, and bipolar are very rare cells. So a little bit of physiology of nerve impulses. So first of all, nerve impulse is called action potential. So every neuron has the ability to create electrical impulse. Electrical impulses can be passed from one neuron to another with the help of neurotransmitter. And electrical impulse relies on ions, sodium and potassium ions. And so now let's so here we have steps in the action potential creation in action potential. So let's see if we're looking at a picture first. So in the picture, just show you that so your neuron, resting neuron. So you have your resting neuron, and it's polar. So it's a cell that has negative charge inside and positive charge outside. So so polar neuron has voltage, and if you measure it, it's minus 70 millivolts. So over here, that's your resting neuron. Then when sodium moves inside neurons, right, and sodium is positively charged, So then we have process called depolarization, because we're going back, we're going here to 0 and then plus 30. So we depolarize. So when sodium moves in, we have depolarization. And then when potassium moves out, and potassium is positively charged, so now we are losing positive charges, the neuron depolarize. So it goes back to minus 70 and it even overshoots this. And then it's returned back to resting minus 70. Right, so this is how it looks on a graph. Resting neuron, minus 70. Depolarization, we go plus 30. Then repolarization, we go even less, like minus 80, minus 85, right? And then back to resting minus 70. And all of this happens, and this is your electricity. So that's the electricity moving along axon, called action potential. And all of this happened because of the ions. So when sodium moves in, we have depolarization. When potassium moves out, we have repolarization. And now we need to, if you have, look, sodium moves in, you need to pump it back out. If potassium moves out, you need to bring it back in to return back to your resting state. And for this, you have a special protein called sodium-potassium pump. What it does, it pumps sodium out because you have too many of sodium that moves in, so you need it out, so you pump it out. And at the same time, sodium moves in, then you need, I'm sorry, potassium moved out, then you need to bring it back in. So it's bring potassium back in, and this will restore your potential to resting potential. Well, now let's go ahead and read our steps. So a cell with the action potential is negatively charged, right? So initially, cell is negatively charged. Then sodium, positive ions, moves into the cell, and cell became positively charged. It's called depolarize. Then sodium movement is stopped, and the potassium moves out, and cell become negatively charged, called repolarize. Then sodium-potassium pump returns sodium and potassium to their original places, so process can be repeated, right? So that's our 3 steps in action potential, right? So it's shows here as well. So this is your resting cell, right? And it's negative inside. Let me draw it so it doesn't disappear, right? So here's your resting cell, and it has negative inside and positive outside, right? So that's a resting neuron. Then when sodium start moving in, and it's positively charged, right? So what happened? You switch the polarity. So now cells became positive inside and negative outside. And then you have potassium moves out. So now you're losing positive charges. So you became, again, negative inside and positive outside, right? But the problem here, well, this is called repolarization. Now, problem here was your sodium, here resting state, you have sodium outside and you have potassium inside. Wait, I'm sorry. Yeah. I'm sorry, this potassium, it's wrong. All right, and you have potassium inside. Sodium outside, potassium inside. But look what happened. Sodium moves in. So sodium moves in, right? And potassium moves out. So it's not your original state because you need to go back to original state. That's why over here, sodium, potassium pump, sodium out, sodium out, sodium out, potassium in, right? But because sodium and potassium are both positively charged, so we exchange positive to a positive, so we still keep this like here, negative inside, positive outside, right? So this is how this action potential is created. And so let me just remove this, all of it. Okay, almost. Okay, good. And I believe this was our last slide. Yep. So that's it for this introduction to the nervous system. Thank you for watching, and I hope it was helpful.